Today's video is brought to you by our good friends over at Nationwide Industries, the Fence Pros' #1 choice. And they are this Fence Pros' #1 choice for a couple reasons. One, we love using their Keystone Traverse latches. They're easy to install. You simply bolt them onto the post. No drilling for rods or cutting the rods required. It's a pretty straightforward installation process. We also love using their full line of galvanized hardware. It shows up quickly and reliably. All right, guys, today's video is from the Stain and Seal Experts YouTube page. I actually saw this one on the Idaho Painters page. I went to look for it. I found it on their page. Here we are. If you'd like to watch the video in its entirety without my commentary, check out the link in the description below. All right, so we're starting about a minute in. So the Idaho Painter has received a stain machine, and he's going to demo the unit and kind of give a brief walkthrough. If you watch the channel, you know we did a reaction probably about a year ago or so. I'm interested to see his reaction of it. So it starts out on a pallet. This is literally how you receive it. I assume this is how we received it. Looks like this is how he received it. It's all packaged up nicely on a pallet. It's a pretty compact unit as is. I mean, this is really the size of the unit when the legs are taken off. So a lot of guys are throwing these in the back of an SUV, in the back of a truck, staining on site for a fence install. There's not a lot of assembly required. It doesn't get much bigger other than it gets taller, obviously, when you put the feet on.
The legs, there's going to be a hole right here, and each one of the legs that a thumb screw is going to go into, and that's what's going to just secure and tighten the leg. This is going to be filled with stain right here, so the bottom roller is going to catch stain, you know, in that reservoir right there. These inserts go on the bottom down here, so when you store your machine, if you're storing it like on an epoxy floor or something, you're not going to scratch the floor. So you're going to just put those down, press down, and it's going to push them up inside, install those. So install all four.
So the legs actually fit on the outside of those feet he was showing you, so you can still put the rubber grommet on the inside and the legs will work all the same. The legs go on the outside. I like this because, to his point, it's got thumb screws that basically hold it in place, but so that if you move it, the legs don't fall off. But largely, gravity's holding this thing together, so you don't worry about if a screw comes loose, does the whole thing collapse and does it spill your stain everywhere, or paint if you're using it to paint trim. It's a very sturdy piece of equipment.
So in order to have your legs correct, your wing nuts will be facing inside. I'm going to tighten these two wing nuts right here. Now we can lift this side up. Luke can put the other two legs in. Wing nut is facing inward, and you'll see there's a bend to the leg that goes outward. This bar actually rotates down right here, and this is what your lumber actually rests on. One of the rollers did come off inside here. We'll reattach this roller. Here's one of the rollers that rolls the edge. You can lift this off, Luke. So I'll set this aside, just set that on.
So what we're seeing here is how easy it is to get in and work on or clean this machine. There's not a lot of servicing required, but it does need clean, and it's pretty easy to access everything. So it looks like one of his vertical rollers came off. The vertical rollers just hit the thin side of the board, with the horizontal rollers hitting the wider side of the board, whether it's pickets, posts, rails, whatever. I believe this machine can do up to a 10 by 10 or 12 by 12. You can get really big. To this point, if you need to get in and service it, if a roller does come off for whatever reason, it's pretty easy just to pop off that stain reservoir, and you've got access to the complete inner workings of this machine. For our part, it makes cleanup a lot easier.
Take both of these off, and we have access right here to our machine that does all the back brushing and rolling. Back brushes that brush top and bottom and sides, and it goes through two sets of back brushing, and it goes through one set of rollers.
So I think that's important. So if you guys watch the channel, you saw a reaction video I did earlier of folks sponging or painting stain on to make sure they get it into all the nooks and crannies. This machine is replicating that at scale, meaning that it's first rolled on, it's applied with the rollers, but then as the board or piece of lumber continues through, those bristled brushes are back brushing that stain, making sure it's gotten into every nook and cranny. It's also removing the excess. They come off not dry, but tacky. They're not soaking wet when they come off, meaning that they're ready to install as they come through this machine. They're coated on every surface. It makes for a smoother install and a better looking board.
These are the rollers, 2 side rollers that do your edges. This is a picket right here, half of a picket. One person's gonna be feeding the picket through, the other person's gonna grab it and continue pulling it through. No motorized components. I'm leaving everything apart so you can actually see inside. Our very first picket, you're gonna do your setup.
So he kind of glossed over no motorized parts. This is different than other equipment in the market in that if you have a thicker stain, such as expert professional wood care products, it might be more, it might tend to clog up more. Just it's a thicker stain. You've got more viscosity to it. It's going to clog up a bit more. We've used other machines and we've found that out firsthand. So by relying on gravity, by not relying on pumps to keep this thing running, our experience is it stays up and running longer. I mean, really, the only downtime is just to keep the thing fed with stain. There's not a lot to go wrong here. You don't have to worry about having electricity on site. You don't have to worry about, obviously assembling a big complex piece of machinery. It is what it is. It's all pretty self-contained. But I wanted to hit on that fact that there's really nothing mechanical to go wrong here. There's no machinery, there's no pumps or electricity required.
Let's set this picket up, the width, get my rollers, the width, and get them so they're actually pressed on there, squishing on there. You're gonna wanna adjust your top roller downward to make sure that presses down on. Just press it down because we want it to roll and squish our stain, press the stain right into the picket. And then you're gonna wanna adjust your brushes to back brush. Once everything is adjusted properly, this is where our stain's gonna feed right through here. We'll set our stand on just like that. Reservoir goes on top. Strainer right here to strain the stain as you dump it in. You're gonna wanna be careful, slowly pour it in. That's your reservoir right here. Now we're gonna tap.
Now, one thing we've done is we've added to this, and it might be that our lumber is more dusty than others. We've added a strain cloth, like a paint strain cloth or straining bag to the bucket where it dumps into. We've also messed around with putting them up top just to try to make sure we keep all the sawdust out of the system as we can. What we found out was as long as there's a straining bag in the bucket, there doesn't necessarily need to be one on top.
Our catch basin is going to be right here. It has a ball valve right here that you're going to open up so everything can pour into your 5-gallon bucket. Last adjustment. This adjustment we want our board to be going in level, so this is a little bit high right here. So we'll make this adjustment. Test run. Luke pulls it through. Board's gonna be staying. Our valves right here are a little bit loose. I'm gonna get a crescent wrench and I'll tighten these valves right here. Just make sure they're loose, otherwise you're gonna get some leaking down there. Strainer's gonna go back on, lid's gonna go back on. Dry run's all done.
So one thing I like about the setup too is everything that can make a mess is contained above that reservoir, above that catch basin. We've mixed some stain up and poured it in the reservoir up top, the top reservoir, and made a bit of a mess. We didn't hit, not all of the stain went in the reservoir, so some of it dripped off the sides. All of that just continues to drip down into that bottom reservoir, so that if we're in a neighbor's yard, we're making sure that we don't make a mess. We want to be as clean as possible, but in a world where accidents can happen, it's nice knowing you've got that fallback of that bottom reservoir to catch anything that, the sponges drip, anything that top reservoir drips. If anything goes wrong, you've got a backup there below that will absolutely catch kind of whatever goes wrong.
Ready to get this thing on the move, staining the fence.
So this is important to note, when you've got new brushes on or just the first run of the day on this machine, you need to run a picket through 2 or 3 times. Let the stain work its way through those sponges. Make sure all of them get coated. Make sure the bottom reservoir has stain in it so that bottom brush is currently or just consistently revolving in it. Make sure you've got stain everywhere. So you like to see kind of that wave of stain riding the front of the board as it, pushes ahead of that top roller. That's how we gauge, is there enough stain dropping down out of those valves? Is it getting that top roller saturated enough? We'll watch that top wave, and if that wave gets sucked back into that sponge, we know that either the board is moving too fast or not enough stain is coming out of those valves. Make some adjustments just to make sure both sides are getting completely flooded with stain. Once you get a couple guys in a rhythm here, this machine moves very fast. The longest part of this is just making sure to keep enough stain mixed up ahead of it, and two, just bringing the stain from the bottom bucket and putting it back in the top reservoir. We ran, when that original video, I think we ran 100 pickets and averaged it out. About 3 seconds a board is what it takes.
If your wood is not kiln dried, you got to down stack your wood so it'll dry out, probably 3 or 4 days. You got to make sure your lumber's dry. That way the lumber will suck up the stain and it'll penetrate deeply. So there we go. To get the tops of the pickets, all I got to do is touch the top of the picket on the roller, hit it, squish it on the roller, top's done. Now,
looks good.
We'll feed it through. So it pre-strains it. It's going to feed down here. Eventually, I'm going to empty it into my bucket. I've got a strainer in my bucket. You definitely want to have a strainer in your bucket because there's going to be a lot of fibers coming off the wood that's going to go into our stain, and we don't want that to clog our machine up. All these are replaceable as a kit, and so which is really nice. So you don't actually have to clean the brushes and rollers if you don't want. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. I didn't know how well it would work, but this is far exceeds my expectations right here.
Again, when they're pulling these pickets off, they're not dry, but they're also not soaking wet. They could just as easily, rather than stacking them there against the shed, they could just as easily be handing them off to a fencing crew that's installing it in real time. It's a heck of a system, it really is.
So we got, wing nuts. We're gonna wanna move these in so it properly back brushes. So you can see the inside of the unit now, what it looks like after using it for, we've done 60 feet of pickets. See if I got everything adjusted properly now. Is it hitting it?
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Both rollers. It's interesting, the rollers work great on the 2x4s because there's more contact surface than the fence picket.
So altogether, I bet they had that thing changed in probably 2 or 3 minutes. It's our experience that because everything's so easy to get to once you pull that upper reservoir off, changeovers are pretty quick, meaning, and just like what you had seen. So he put in a sample product or a product that's getting ready to be stained, simply adjusted the height and the width of those rollers, and then the back brushes, you're off to the races. Everything's wing nuts to where it's really easy to back it off, adjust it, tighten it back. Again, probably 2-3 minutes if they were taking their time for a changeover.
So it's now 2 hours. We've got 60 feet of privacy fence rolled and back brushed. I would say that's pretty fast.
Guys, the machine is that easy to use. It comes in largely pre-assembled. Really, you just add the legs and adjust your brushes and rollers for whatever it is you're wanting to stain. It's easy to set up, easy to operate. 2 people on this can get in a rhythm and be really efficient at staining these boards. Like I said, I think we timed it at roughly about 3 seconds a picket. So very quick, very easy to use. You saw him doing cleanup. It was also very easy. So let me know what you think in the comments below of the Expert Paint and Stain Machine. Is it something you could see yourself using? Do you have questions about it? Be happy to help however we can. For now, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, and I'll see you next time.